My name is Hariharan. I am from NIC, National Informatics Center. So I am from a particular division in NIC, which is known as NIC CERT. So NIC CERT, I hope most of you might have known about CERT N. So CERT N is a computer emergency response team for the entire nation. So they cater to security incidents which happens in both private and the government sector. Whereas the NIC CERT division, it caters to the security incidents which happen within the NIC network. So it doesn't matter whether you are a state government or a central government organization. If you're connected to the NIC network and if you're using any NIC services, then we would be handling any security incidents that happen in that particular area. So in this presentation today, we would be covering some basic security guidelines which we recommend or advise people who operate within the NIC network. So this is a generic guideline, so it can be applied anywhere, not just specific to NIC, even outside NIC. If you're a public sector organization or if you're an autonomous body who have an independent network, so you can also uh, make use of these guidelines. These are very generic guidelines. So, but rather than covering a plain set of guidelines, so what we are going to see in this session is some actual case studies. So actual security incidents which happen and how we can map the mitigation factor, the solution, that means the security best practices, which if followed properly could have avoided the security compromise in the first place. So I'll be covering certain security incidents which actually happened and which we handled in an IC cert, and how you can prevent the occurrence of certain security incidents, what best practices you need to follow at your organization or at your level. So that we will be seeing in the next 45 minutes of this lecture. So let me go ahead. So first we will have a look at the email security, because email security is being given more importance in this session, because during the last 1 year, that is a time when COVID started, somewhere around March, mid-March or early April. Since that time, we have been seeing a massive increase in phishing attacks targeted at government employees. And phishing attack just provides a front door entry for the hackers to get into your network. So all you had to do is just click a link, and whatever script or program the hacker has hosted on that link may get executed on your computer, and your computer may get compromised. And once your computer is compromised, then the hacker can use your computer or machine to move laterally within your entire network. So let's say in your local LAN, you have 50 machines connected. So in order to compromise the 50 machines, hacker has to gain access to only one machine. So, but again, it depends on what are the other security measures you have implemented in your LAN, but most of the organization don't have any restrictions in the lateral movement. So only when you go across a firewall or when you hop from one VLAN to other VLAN, then some security measures would come into picture. So I'll just give you certain examples on how such incidents happen. So this is just a statistics. So this is based on one of the report from Gartner. So these are the different odds which they see, like the odds of you getting stuck in a lightning is 1 in 960,000. And of course, the odd of dating a millionaire, they are saying 1 in 220. But the odds of one of you experiencing a data breach is 1 in 4. So that means literally most of you sitting in this session may have experienced a data breach either one way or the other. So how, I'll let you know on the next slide. So a couple of years ago, there was a very most prominent news which flashed across many media, newspapers, and other things. So there was a news about more than 700 million email credentials, that is, a hacked credentials, which are openly circulating in many forums. Earlier, this database of credentials was only available in dark web, that is the Tor network and the other relay networks. But now, 2 years ago, there was a news item which claimed that these credentials are available in open web. Open web means it could be hosted in any of the websites like a github.com or a pastebin.com. So, but how these 700 million credentials were accumulated in a single database? So, what happened is hackers, they operate in isolation. There are different groups of hackers in different countries and different sectors. So, what they do, they periodically hack into or breach some organization or some application or a website. To give you an example, the names you're seeing here, Yahoo, LinkedIn, Zomato, Yatra. So all these websites have been breached during the last 7 or 8 years. So if you ever had account in any one of these websites during the last 7 or 8 years, then your account is also most likely compromised. So once these sites are hacked, what the hacker do is they dump the entire database. So whatever data it may be, it can be your name, date of birth, your address, your phone number. And in some cases, if they're able to get hold of the passwords, they just save it into a single database. And over a period of time, hackers also collaborate with each other. So let's say hacker X who has hacked into Yahoo, he will be having with him the entire username and credentials of Yahoo. Whereas the another hacker Y who hacked into LinkedIn, he might be having the LinkedIn user credentials. So both of them, they post in a common forum where they exchange such hacked databases. And then these knowledge is accumulated or aggregated into a single database. And why it is being done? Because it is very easy to use such databases in a mass scale attack, which is commonly known as a password spraying attack. A password spraying attack is where a database of username and password is brute forced across multiple websites. So most of us, what we do, we use a same or similar set of credentials across multiple sites. So let's say, for example, the password which you use for your Gmail account, the same password you could use for your e-commerce website. It can be an Amazon or a Flipkart also. And luckily, let's say the username and password for both Amazon and Flipkart and your Gmail is same, then hacker would most probably get access to all your accounts. And then this collective information is sold in the dark web or hacker forums. So how your credentials gets compromised in the first place? So one of the common methods of a credential getting compromised is you downloading a piece of software which may have been infected or embedded with a malicious program. In this case, it could be a keylogger, it could be a Trojan, or whatever. So a keylogger is a piece of software. What it does is it captures every single keystroke which you type on your keyboard. It saves it in a file, and then it sends it to the hacker's C2 server, which is the command and control server. And the second reason why your password is getting compromised, I mean, that's what which we discussed currently, reusing the same password across multiple sites. So by chance, if any of you are using the same password across multiple sites, please don't do that. Go and change it. And wherever two-factor authentication is available, please enable that. So don't have any critical accounts without two-factor. Two-factor is very, very essential in today's world to at least get an alert in case if your username or password is compromised. So another way where how your credential could get compromised is saving the credentials in the browser. So when you save the credentials in the browser, what happens is when you visit multiple websites using the same browser, so there are certain sites which offer like a free movie you can download or a free song or a free game. So when you go to such websites and download, you might have seen a download button and a lot of advertisements across on the either side of the download button. And once you click the download button, you can see a very quick, I mean, less than you can see even a 2 second or a 3 second, like 10 or 20 pop-up will open and will automatically close. Initially, these pop-ups were used to be advertisements. They used to generate ad revenues based on each click. So when you make a single click on the download button, internally the script converts it into 20 different clicks and it will open up 20 different ads. And all these pop-up will be closed within 1 or 2 seconds. But now what happens is many such free file sharing sites, they have inadvertently started embedding malicious scripts also. So now when you click, you not only get advertisement, you also get a Trojan dropped into your system or the browser. When such malicious plugin gets installed in your browser, then they can steal your cookies, your session, your passwords, and whatever you have stored there. And not to mention any browser related vulnerabilities which we are seeing every month, be it Chrome, Firefox, Opera, all browsers are getting new vulnerabilities uh, on a day every month basis. So if such vulnerabilities exist and if somebody can exploit it, then again your credentials which you have saved in the browser are no longer safe. So it's not a best practice to save the credentials in the browser. Please don't do that. And the last thing is, this is something out of your hands. You have nothing to do in this case. That is, if the site where you have your account gets breached, then the only thing you can do at your end is just go back and change your username and password. So all the sites mentioned here, Yahoo, LinkedIn, Zomato, Yatra, Quora, Marriott, each one of them have been breached during the last 7 to 8 years. And their entire database is already available in open web and dark web. It is accessible to n number of hackers. So by chance, if you're still using any of the old passwords which you have kept in these sites during the last 7 or 8 years, please go back and change it. So this is a very recent phishing mail. By recent, it is, you can see the date, April 26th. This came yesterday. So hackers, since the time COVID started, they started to exploit the COVID related theme for new phishing attacks. And this email, you can see it is very beautifully crafted. So they are targeting specifically government employees, where their subject says it is a COVID vaccination scheme for government employees and their families. And it says some Ministry of Health and Family Welfare official. And you can see a attachment which says COVID vaccination something.zip. If you have a casual glance at the attachment, it seems like a legitimate attachment. It seems like a zip file is attached here. But in reality, this is not an attachment. This is actually a image file. So when you move your mouse cursor on top of this so-called attachment, at the bottom of your browser, you can literally see the link to where it is leading. So if you actually click on this attachment, it will not download anything. It will just redirect you to an external website, which is a shortened URL. I don't think I have that. No, I don't have, because the incident is still under investigation. So I have the details in a separate system. So what happens is Once you click on it, it will lead you to a shortened URL website, that is tinyurl.com kind of website, which will again redirect you to a Google Drive link. And once you go to the Google Drive link, it will tell you to download the COVID vaccination guidelines. And if you download, you will see a legitimate COVID vaccination guidelines, which is a COVID app guidelines, how to log into the app, how to register. So, which is actually released by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. They have just used that as a decoy document. And along with that original PDF, you get another shortcut file. It is a file with the .lnk extension. It's a shortcut. So once you double click on that, that goes to a website, which is again a legitimate website, but the website has been compromised. And hackers have hosted the actual malicious payload on that site. So the malware gets dropped into your system and it does two things. The first thing is the malware goes to your antivirus and Windows firewall, whatever you have. It creates an exception for itself. An exception means your malware and Windows firewall will not stop any activities of that file. So that literally means whatever your malware does, your system or the whatever security software you have, it will not scan it. And once an exception is created, then it again goes back to another website and it fetches the next stage payload, which is the Trojan. And this is where the keylogger comes into place. So it comes with the keylogger and it establishes a reverse shell connection with the hacker's server. A reverse shell connection is nothing but a backdoor connection. So hacker will literally have a full control on your system and he can execute any commands he wants. If he wants, he can literally wipe every single file stored on your system. So he can do anything. The possibility is endless. So luckily the phishing mail was reported to us within 10 or 15 minutes because this mail was sent to like 1,500 people yesterday. And one of the alert individuals, the moment he saw that, he alerted us. And luckily, we were able to delete the mails from all the inboxes before most of them could actually open it. So, always in such cases, awareness is the key thing. If you see any suspicious email, or any suspicious attachment, or if you receive mail from any unknown sender, please don't click on the link or click on the attachment. Just report the email to us. Where to report? There is an email ID. It's in the coming slides. I'll just show you. You can just drop an email to us and then we will handle it. In case if it is a malicious one, we'll write back to you and we'll let you know it is a malicious mail. This is also pretty recent. This is again yesterday email. This incident happened yesterday. So I don't know how many of you are aware about Parichai. Parichai is a SSO, single sign-on platform, which is being used for some NIC applications. The one is the eOffice, and if some of you are using web VPN, there also you might have come across Parichai. And pretty soon this platform will be integrated into the email also. So if you're logging into an NIC email account, then you may have to go through Parichai authentication in the future. So what hacker did is hacker has developed a fake email. I mean, whenever you log into a Parichai, you will get the OTP both on your mobile and email. So earlier we used to send OTP in email, but now we have stopped sending OTP through email. The reason being is by chance if your email account is compromised, if the hacker is in possession of the email account, then he can pretty well have access to all your OTPs. So now OTPs are only sent to the mobile, not to the email. But hacker has picked up this from the previous, the old Parichai where when we used to send OTPs to email. And if you can see one particular button, he's saying on the last line, if you see, click here to verify your account. So when you press this, the click here, it will actually redirect you to a tiny URL, in this case also. Let me show you. I think I have the copy of the email. Let me check. So I hope you can see my web browser. So, okay, so this is the email. It was sent from a government user account, a compromised account. So here you can see a click here. If you move your mouse across here, you can actually click on this particular link. So if you click on it, it will lead you to an external website. Normally, when NIC used to send a OTP or something, we don't embed any links in this. Even though today NIC is not sending OTP over email, but earlier when we used to send that, we never embed any link on top of this. But still, you can just right click on this, you do a copy link. And let me compose a new message and show you what is the actual link. Okay, so this is the one, the subject you can see, tiny.cc/Parichai. So this is the URL. So this is again a shortened URL. So this will, once you click on this, this will lead you to some other URL. So where the actual malware is hosted. But always be very careful. Don't click on such links because some links are very, very volatile. The moment you click it, a script will be downloaded automatically on your PC. So don't expect that only if you download a file and execute it, then only the malware will come into action. It's not the case. In many cases, just clicking the URL and visiting a site can literally compromise your entire PC. So let me go back. So this is again another case, but this is a almost a year old. So this is a fake NIC email web page which hacker has hosted on a Bangladesh website. If you see the website biac.org.bd. So this is a Bangladeshi organization. It's a biotechnology related body. So hacker has hacked into this website and they hosted the fake email mail.gov.in. This is the old version of NIC email. They hosted this email and then they sent a link of this website to the government users over email. So luckily this attack also we were able to capture it pretty early. Then through certain, the Bangladesh CERT was contacted and we took this website down pretty quickly so that damage was prevented. So always be careful whenever you get any email or SMS or even WhatsApp or social media text which says that click this link to log in, click this link to reset your password. Don't directly click it. So as a best practice, type the name of the website. Any website where you want to log in, be it your banking websites or an e-commerce platform or an email, social media, whatever it is. First, use private browsing on the browser, then type the name of the website. Don't follow any links and don't bookmark the website also. Sometimes what happens is you may bookmark the website, but by chance, let's say, assume that your web browser or the system gets compromised. Then hacker can just simply manipulate your bookmark. So instead of facebook.com, he can lead you to some other fake facebook.com website. And there he could just literally harvest your credentials. So it is always a best practice to type the name of such websites and then don't store the passwords also. Type it physically. So there is another fake email.gov.in website. This is also pretty recent. This happened day before yesterday. You can see the website. Website name is eschools.in. So this website has been hacked by the hackers and they have posted the fake email.gov.in webpage on this particular website. So when you go to this website and type the username and password of your NIC email address, hacker will store the username and password and you won't get any response. When the second time you again type the username and password, you would be successfully logged in into your email account. So what is happening here is, in the first time you see the website is not email.gov.in, it is eschool.in. The first time when you put your username and password, hacker will store it in his database and he redirects you to the original email.gov.in. So the second time the URL changes, but the content in the page remains the same. So you won't notice it until and unless you pay very close attention to the address bar on the browser. So second time you're actually logging into the original email.gov.in. So that is the reason why I was telling you earlier not to follow any links to log in into a website. Just type it and please make sure that HTTPS is enabled. This is again another example of a phishing mail which was circulating at the time of the Balakot strikes. So they used the theme of the Balakot strike, and here the key is you can see the URL says public-info.mod.gov.in .exclusive.pic. So a normal layman user may assume that it is a genuine government MOD link. But once you move your cursor, once you place your mouse pointer on top of this URL or the link, you will get the actual URL. So the actual URL you can see beneath that, mediashare.cc. It is a file sharing website and they have hosted a Trojan on the site. So once you open that particular file, again, the same thing happens. A keylogger gets dropped and your system gets compromised. So don't click on such links. Always report such emails so that action is taken. So other users also saved from similar attacks. So in the new email system, that is the email.gov.in, what has been introduced? One is all communications are encrypted, which is HTTPS, the transport layer security is done. And geofencing has been implemented by default for all users. So what does this mean? Geofencing means by default, you can log in into your account from India-based IP addresses only. Let's say your account gets compromised. Your username and password is from with some hacker who is sitting in France or Germany. And if he tries to log in from a France or a Germany-based IP, then the login will not be allowed because your account is only authorized for access from India. And by chance, if you want to travel anywhere, let's say you, for official purposes, you have to travel to US or Canada, wherever you want to travel, you have a app called Kavach, which NIC is providing. So in that app, you can create a whitelist for US or Canada or whichever country you want to travel. And the time duration also. Let's assume you are going on a foreign trip for 1 week. So you can choose that 1 week time duration during which all your logins from US will be allowed. And once you return back from the trip, the whatever the 1 week duration, once it is expired, then the geofencing with the Indian restrictions takes over, or you can also at any time manually disable it. And then two-factor authentication also we are providing. That is the Kavach app, which I told you about. I think I have a slide in the next slide. Yeah, this is the Kavach. So Kavach app, we are trying really hard, and we have been pushing most of the users to get this two-factor enabled. And the reason why we are telling this is, once you get Kavach activated on your account, so every time, whenever you put your username and password, if it is a correct username and password, then you get a prompt on the Kavach app. So this app is available for Android, iOS, and for desktop also. If you have Windows desktop, you can install it on Windows also. So you get a prompt. The prompt says, it tells you the IP from where the login is being attempted, the country, and the timestamp, date, everything. And it tells you whether you would like to allow or deny the request. That is accept or deny. So by chance, if you have attempted the login, then you know that you have done the login and you can just click on accept. Then you will be allowed to log in into your account. Let's assume you have not attempted a login into your account, but you still got this alert on your phone or the desktop. That means someone has used your correct password to log in into your account. So this means your account is compromised. So immediately you can click deny. And even if you don't do anything, still there will be a timeout. The person will not be able to log in into your account. But you should also report this incident to us so that we can go back and review who attempted the login, from which IP it was done, and whether the same IP is involved in logging into some other user account. So all these investigations we'll do at the back end. From your perspective, you can immediately change your username and password. And also you have to get your computer or laptops, whatever you use, get it scanned with the antivirus to check for any trojans or keyloggers on your machine, because your password has been compromised. That is how the hacker has tried to log in into your account. So you need to make sure your system doesn't have any trojans installed on it. So this is again another shortened URL case. Earlier we were talking about tiny.cc, tiny URL case. This is a similar attack, but it came through SMS. SMS was the medium of this attack. So they were talking about a fake Amazon package being shipped. So, but this attack was more towards the objective of capturing your financial details. So once you click on this link, so ultimately you would like to see how the iPhone order was placed on Amazon. So either you want to cancel the order because you have never placed it, or you want to see what happens if I actually want to receive the order. So once you click on the link, a fake Amazon web page will open. And in that page, you'll get two options. Either you can pay for the iPhone or you can cancel the order. So it doesn't matter which option you choose. Whatever option you choose, you will be redirected to the next page where the hacker will ask you to provide your details, your name, your address, date of birth, and your security questions like what is your mother's maiden name and your credit card details. So once you give all these details, you click submit, then you will get a fake reference number. They will say your request has been received and it is being processed by Amazon customer care. So please use this reference request number in all future correspondence, and they'll say thank you very much. So now the job is done. So you will feel that, yeah, I have canceled the order for iPhone. Now I am safe. But what hacker has done is he has captured very critical data about you. Remember, he has captured your date of birth, your name, your email address, and certain security questions which are used in banks and many websites, like your mother's maiden name, the city where you were born, your best friend's name. So there are 5 or 6 such questions. And all these questions can be used to reset your passwords in many sites. So that is the first risk. Second risk is he has captured your credit card details, including the CVV number. So luckily in India, if you make any online transactions using a credit or a debit card, you have the feature of OTP based approval. But whereas if you use the same credit card in any foreign countries, let's say you use the same credit card on Amazon.com instead of Amazon.in, there they may not ask a OTP. So without OTP, just purely based on the card details, including the expiry date, month, and the CVV number, the transaction would be authorized. The only thing you will get on your mobile is the receipt of transactions stating that this much amount has been detected from your card. So, but hacker who has harvested this information, he will not use it by himself. He just sells these details in the dark web to some other person who may most probably use it for any illegal activities. So this is again one of the reason why I was insisting on more caution while clicking on shortened URLs, because you don't know what original URL is hiding behind this. So if you are connected to an NIC network, we have set up a portal. The portal name is urlcheck.nic.in. So in this portal, you can do two things. One is if you receive any such shortened URLs in email or any other medium, you can just go to this portal. You can log in using your NIC username and password. NIC email username and password is universal. You can use it to log in here. And you can paste the shortened URL. So what this site does is it expands the URL and it tells you what is the original URL behind this. So in the sample, you can see a fake website called pmoindiagov.in, which is hiding behind the tiny URL. So that is one feature. The second feature, there is a URL scan. So any URL or a domain, you can go, you can just paste it on this portal. It will scan the URL and it will tell you whether it is a malicious URL or a genuine URL. So that is purely based on the threat intelligence which we have at our end, and we are consistently updating it also. And now we are even working on embedding a file analysis component into this. So it is just under testing. Maybe in a month or two, we'll be launching it. So what happens is you can even upload any files. Let's say you has received a PDF file in email as an attachment, and you are not sure whether it is a genuine file or a malware file. So you can just come to this portal, upload the file. The portal will execute the file in a sandbox, and based on certain algorithms, it will analyze the file and it will tell you whether it is a genuine or a malicious file. So next we'll see what you can do at your organization to ensure the basic security. So the first thing is to define a proper roles and responsibility for all the people involved in accessing any ICT resource. So who has what access to which device or the data, that is very important. And always make sure that the admin credentials for your servers or the network components or security devices or databases, applications, everything should always reside with government. Even if you have any outsourced agencies or outsourced contracted employees, one set of admin credentials, super admin, should always reside with a government personnel. So that ensures the strategic control is always with us. And whatever operations each one does, be it the government employee or the outsourced employee, everything should be logged. So ensure that logging is enabled in all devices, whatever you have. And these logs, it's always better to store at a central location. If you have a syslog server or something like that in your environment, please store it over there separately. And the access of this syslog server should be with government personnel so that nobody can tamper the logs at a later date. So whatever logs you have, ship it to a central logging server and store it there. BCP and contingency planning. So this is very essential, especially when you face a disaster. So let's say you have a public facing website or an application, and that application is catering to a audience who is located within India. So in such case, there is no need for the application to be accessible outside India. So you can go to your hosting provider. If it is NIC, you can tell the NIC data center team, or if it is some other private data center or your own data center, you can tell the data center team to restrict access of the site to foreign based IPs. So if you do this perimeter level restriction of geography based restriction, that will limit the number of security threats which your application or website is exposed to. Because otherwise what happens is, if your website is exposed to the entire world and only people within India are using it, anyone sitting anywhere across the world can just simply scan your website. And literally, you won't believe me, on a daily basis we are seeing anywhere between 700 to 900 million attempts of scanning on government infrastructure. So today, if I create a public IP which doesn't exist, if I get a new IP assigned to my IP pool, and once the IP becomes active, within a few seconds, I can see traffic on that IP. So that means people are consistently scanning our entire IP segment. And whatever new site you host, even if you just host it for testing purposes, that also immediately will be captured by the people who are doing the scan. So in order to limit your exposure, threat exposure, just restrict the geography location if your audience is not outside India, and have a BCP plan ready. So they'll always have one copy of critical data stored offline. It can be in a tape drive, or you can store it on any hard disk and keep it unplugged from the network. The reason why I'm saying this is, sometimes due to extreme scenarios, let's say a ransomware attack happened in your organization, and if proper segmentation and security controls are not deployed, the attack can just freely move across your organization, and it can even compromise your servers also. And by chance, if your backup system is also connected to the same network, then there is a very high likelihood the backup system may also get infected by the ransomware. So that is why it is always better to have one offline copy of critical data, and just whatever backup policies you follow, do that. As a best practice, what people generally do is they do a once in a month full backup and daily incremental backup. If you have sufficient storage space, you can even do weekly full backups also. That is entirely up to you. So before doing this, what you first need to do is, first you need to know what hardware or infrastructure you have under your possession. It can be either located in your premise or it can be located in a cloud infrastructure also. But it's essential to have a central inventory on what are the assets you have, both hardware, software, and the people. And then you have to map these assets with each other. So this is a sample asset inventory which we have developed and we are using in NIC. So on the one side, you can see the name of the component. It can be a hardware or it can be a software. And the technology which is running on that particular hardware or software is also given, and the version of the technology stack. Let's say CentOS 7.3, and the last update date is also given. So why this is essential is, let's say for example, today CentOS comes out with a patch. They say any CentOS version less than 7.5 is highly vulnerable to a remote code exploitation, RCE. then immediately you can just go through this inventory sheet and find out how many such vulnerable CentOS versions you are running in your organization or project, whatever it is. And then you can direct particular IT team to take action to upgrade the versions of the operating system. So this gives you a single shot, one shot view of the entire hardware landscape which you have, hardware, software, and also gives you a proper control on the versioning. And this is a user role-based access mapping, which I was talking about earlier. So you have to map the individuals, be it outsourced or the government personnel. Just list down the names, the designation, what role they are playing, and what access they have on each component, be it a server or a software or a system, along with the ports. So this would be very handy in case while you are investigating any security incidents. So if something goes wrong, you can immediately find out who has done what. And also when employees leave the organization, when some of your outsourced employees or government employees they leave the organization or the project, this sheet will come in handy. So you can immediately find out what privilege that person has in his possession and you can just revoke it. The next is having an updated deployment architecture of your applications. So this is a sample architecture for the servers which we have in NIC's NDC, which is the National Data Center. So it depends on what applications you have and where you have hosted. So there are multiple appliances which sits in front of your application. So in this case, you can see an intrusion prevention system, a load balancer, a web application firewall. So it is essential for you to know what network and security devices are sitting in front of your application. The reason being is in case of any troubleshooting, be it a security incident or even a IT or a performance related issue troubleshooting, knowing the path on how the traffic flows helps you to find out where the latency is occurring. And especially when you use devices like load balancer or a web application firewall, what happens in this device is something called a NAT, network address translation, happens at this device. So what the load balancer does is the load balancer, it answers all the requests on behalf of the web server. So whatever IP address is assigned to the web server, that will be actually taken over by the load balancer. And at the backend, load balancer will be routing the request to the web server. So when you do this kind of local NAT and route traffic between load balancer and the web server, then in the logs of the web server, whatever web access log you have, you will get only the IP address of the load balancer on all the requests. Let's say a user came and accessed www.india.gov.in. So the log stored in the server will only say that load balancer came and requested for the page. It will not show you the original IP of the user who may be sitting in US or Europe or Australia, wherever. So in order to capture the original IP of the user, you need to enable something called X forwarded for header. So this you will come to know only if you have this architecture diagram in place. Like if you are aware that you have a load balancer in front or and a WAF in front. So by chance, if any genuine traffic is also getting blocked, then this helps you in troubleshooting. So always speak to the data center team and find out what devices are sitting in front of your application and just make a rough sketch. That is more than enough. This is a sample diagram which we have developed for one of the applications which we use in NIC. Again, this is just for reference, so you could create your own architecture diagram, whatever you want. So for the server security, what are the general guidelines which we are recommending is always use VPN to access the server. And by default, if your application is in NIC, we mandatorily enforce VPN. Without VPN, we don't give access to any servers. But For website updation, there is something called a content management system. Many websites nowadays use content management system. It can be a Drupal based website or it can be a WordPress based website. They have the CMS framework. So these CMS framework, they have a online web based administrative portal through which you can update the content of the site. So which essentially means that in order to update the website, you don't need a VPN. If only you connect to the web server, then you need a VPN. But for updating the content of the website, many people use CMS, so they can literally bypass the VPN and through internet they can access the administrator panel. So be careful in this case, because when you open your administrative panel of the CMS in the internet, it is not just you who is getting the access. Even the hackers who are just literally scanning all government websites, every single public IP we have, they are also getting access to it. So they will come to know about it and they will try a lot of brute forcing and other hacking methodologies to break into your website. In many cases, we have seen people using default username and password for the CMS. So, which literally means that your site will get compromised in a few minutes. So, as a best practice, what we recommend people is, if at all you have any such CMS through which you update the website, please restrict the access of the CMS from the internet. Never allow it over internet. Just allow it for your particular VPN IP only. Let's say you have two developers who are updating the website. Issue a VPN token to them and allow only the VPN IP to access the CMS admin console, so that all the other traffic is blocked. And this access restriction can be directly done by you on the web server itself. If you're using Apache, you can do it in Apache, or if you're using IIS web-based web server, then it is also possible in IIS. And hardening is another main thing, hardening the operating system. So you can go to the NIC's website, security.nic.in, so where NIC has published a lot of security hardening documents for Windows, for Linux, for web servers, database, everything is there. So you can follow those hardening guidelines and just make the security configuration on your systems accordingly. Then use of AV and HIPS. HIPS is nothing but host-based intrusion prevention system. So host-based intrusion prevention system are one step ahead of traditional antivirus. So what they do is they have lot of application layer signatures. They can detect a lot of application layer attacks like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and they also provide virtual patching. So what is virtual patching? Let's say today there is a critical vulnerability on Drupal and your website is running on Drupal. But if you patch the website today, you feel that it may affect any existing functionality. So you need some time for testing it. Let's say you need 4 or 5 days to test the patch and then you wanted to update on production. But until 5 days during the time when the patch is not applied, your website is not safe because any hacker can just hack your website. The vulnerability is already in public domain. So this is where virtual patching comes into place. So even though you have not patched your website, the HIPS does come with a signature for the particular vulnerability. So you can just enable that signature and this signature will block all exploitation attempt on the particular vulnerability until you patch your server. So which is really handy in many cases. And then regularly conduct VAPT, vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So for the website, it is recommended to conduct a security audit at least twice a year, or whenever you make any changes to the code. So many people, what they do is they keep on changing code every week or every day. Changing code doesn't mean the normal regular content updation. Content updation is different. By changing code, I mean functional upgrades. So in such cases, you should get the application audited by a certain panel auditor so that any vulnerabilities which may have creeped into due to the recent update is taken care of. So this is a case study of which happened on a Ministry of Defense website. This happened a couple of years ago. So one fine day, a Ministry of Defense website, it started showing this particular message. So on the top, you can see a character, a left alphabet in a foreign language is displayed. So the moment people saw this, immediately they concluded that it has been hacked by Chinese hackers. And of course, the character somewhat resembles, it may be a Chinese character, it can be a Japanese, or it can be Korean also. But it is one of these South Asian countries. Immediately, many news channels picked up this information, and without any proper validation, they started bashing China around. And coincidentally, the same day, there was a DGMO level meeting. Yeah, DGMO is a Director General Military Operation. So ideally, every now and then, the military DGMOs, the head of the militaries at the border, at both India and China, they meet together at the border. They have a general discussion that is a part of the confidence building measures. So on that day, a DGMO meeting was scheduled to happen. And the same day, the MOD website also started showing this. So the news media, they started calling many names. They said that China backstabbed India by calling for talks on one side and doing cyber operations on the other. And some news channels even started debates. There are people connected over phone, telephone. They are each one had their own explanation. And some people they even started blaming Rahul Gandhi for this. I don't know for what good reason they had. So each one had their own opinion. But actually, what happened was the character which you saw on the first page, that was not Chinese, it is a Japanese character. And the Japanese character, it means Zen, the Japanese word Zen, which is a word which stands for wisdom or inner peace or whatever you can call something like a nirvana, which we call in Buddhism. So a Zen is a theme used in Drupal. Just like we have a desktop theme, these website frameworks, Drupal also has a theme. They have many themes and Zen is one of them. So MOD website was using the Zen Drupal theme, but unfortunately the administrator didn't do proper hardening of the website. So when you do a proper hardening of the website, what happens is you take into account certain scenarios. Let's say your website is not available, then you have a custom error page. The error page may say that the site is under construction or the site is undergoing maintenance. Please come back later, whatever it is. But in this case, nothing has been done like that. So it started showing that default error page, which is this particular Japanese character. And then it led to a lot of misinterpretation, and the entire day was ruined for the government. So hardening is one thing, because in Drupal, what happens is Drupal actually loads the site content from the database. So you need the database connectivity to the web server in order for the site to function. On this particular day, there was a problem in connection between the web server and the DB server, due to which database was not available. And that is why the default page came up. So instead, the administrator should have changed the default page to something else. Like I told you, like site is under maintenance or whatever, a custom page. Then it would have completely avoided the confusion. But luckily they learned their lesson and now they started implementing all these things. So the incident why I'm referring here is hardening is very, very critical. Even missing a simple hardening step like custom error page has caused a lot of reputation loss for the government in this MOD case. So this is another server which got hacked. They used a default password. Default means it's admin, the username is admin and password is admin at the rate 123. This is the password for the server, and the server was hacked by some hackers and they started using the server for cryptocurrency mining. So let's say the server was having 32 cores of CPU, 256 GB of RAM, and all these computing resource was being used by hacker for running the cryptocurrency. So they were mining cryptocurrency, and the users who are accessing the website, they literally were not able to access the site because the site is very slow. On a daily basis, there were consistent complaints saying that we are not able to access the website. It goes into a timeout. So, but when further we investigated the server, then we found all these cryptocurrency mining scripts running on the server. You can even see a watermark at the bottom of the page. It says activate Windows. So this means they have not even activated the server license. They were just running on a trial version of the Windows server. And here you can see the connection string, the password which I told you. This is a DB connection string. Username is the default SA and the password is admin@123. So as a best practice in hardening, you should not use the default usernames. If it is SA or administrator, you always should rename the username, and password should be complex. You shouldn't use any such default password like admin123 or admin456, whatever it is. Never use these kind of things. These are some things which we gain access into the database, and the database is already copied by the hacker. So this is an infographic which we have created for the government users. So this just tells you 12 basic steps to maintain security hygiene. And here you can see a email address at the bottom of the infographic. It says incident@nic-cert.nic.in. So if you want to report any security incident which happened within an NIC network or in NIC email, you can inform us on this particular ID. So we'll act accordingly. By chance, if let's say you're a public sector or if you're connected outside an IC network, then you can report your incident to certain at the rate certain incident at the rate certain.org.in. So this 12-point security hygiene steps is very simple. Most of them you can go through and we have already discussed. So one key thing which I would like to point out here is point number 3 and 4. So point number 3, you can see we are advising not to use any remote administration tools like AnyDesk, AmiAdmin, and TeamViewer. The reason being is when you use these kind of tools, I mean the free versions I'm talking about, and let's say you want to connect between two systems which are located in your office, the two systems may be sitting next to each other, but still when you use any of these tools, the entire traffic goes outside of India to a server somewhere in Europe or wherever they have their server, and from there the connection is established. And the entire thing happens in a UDP connection. So there's a very high likelihood or whatever transpires during this connection could be intercepted by anyone in between. That is the first thing. The second thing is some of these tools, they got hacked or embedded with a Trojan. So by hacked, I mean their official repository where the AmiAdmin tool is hosted or where AnyDesk is hosted on the official website. So a year or a couple of years ago, the hackers broke into the site and they modified the original setup file and they embedded a Trojan into that. So by chance, if you have used the tool during the last 2 years, the particular infected version, then your system is already compromised, your passwords and everything is already gone. So it is always advisable not to use such kind of remote access tools. If you want, you can get a paid one, and if it is hosted in your own network, then it will be much better so that no data goes outside your network. And the second thing is the point number 4, where we are requesting you to configure NIC's DNS 164.100.3.1. So this is a DNS server which NIC is running, and this is a highly redundant DNS server. We have around 13 servers spread across India, all running on a same Anycast IP. So what we have done is we have compiled a blacklist of malicious domains. So it's a very big blacklist. It runs into several millions. So whenever any new phishing attacks we observe, like the attack which I showed you in the case studies, or any other security incident we investigate, we come to know about the new malicious domains which are being used by hackers. So we block all these domains in this particular DNS server. And when your machine, if you try to access these domains, then it will not be allowed access. And you will get the reason also. It will say this is a malicious domain, that only it has been blocked. So if you are connected to an NIC network, please ensure that your machine is configured with this DNS. By default, this is the DNS which is configured, but some people, they manually modify it into a Google DNS like 8.8.8 or something else. So if you're doing that, then you are bypassing the security restrictions and the security protection which you get. So please ensure that this DNS is configured in your machine. And another important thing, don't use administrative account on your desktops or laptops for your day-to-day activities. Always create two accounts. One can be an admin account and one can be a non-admin. It is a standard account. So use the admin account only for installing or making any configuration changes. Other than that, your day-to-day activities like browsing a website or using a office document or a PowerPoint presentation, use a standard account. Because if your system is infected with a malware, in order to execute successfully, the malware requires administrative privileges. So if you are logged in as a standard user, then the damage caused by the malware would be greatly reduced. And also the chances of exploiting any vulnerabilities is also highly reduced. Because for doing any such exploitation or privilege escalation, an admin credential is required. An admin privilege is required, so it will prompt for admin credentials. So always keep two different accounts and use only the standard account for your day-to-day operations. By chance, if you get any pop-up for admin credentials in between, please check which process is requesting for the access. And if you have not manually done anything, then don't type their username or password. It could be a malware just prompting for admin credentials. So I think that's it from my side. We have come to the end of the presentation. So any questions can take up, otherwise we can wind up the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for a wonderful session and very good insights. We'll just look into the